Video games nowadays are one of, if not the biggest form of entertainment in the world. Gaming has allowed so many people to truly experience a story and what the designer envisioned. A lot of people also find a lot of pleasure by going back and playing all those older games like NES, but gaming goes way further back than just that. One of the first things that people think of when they think of the first video game ever is Pong, and that is actually true. Back in 1958, physicist William Higginbotham created a simple tennis game that basically is just Pong, even though Pong itself wasn't technically released until the 70s. Over time, though, William would actually have the game be available in a library for the public to play. Many of the guests had a lot of fun with the so-called video game, although William saw it only as an experiment, and he didn't do too much with it. As time went on, Tennis for Two, as it was called, had been mostly forgotten, and in 1964, the Sanders Association bought the first patent for video games, and in the early 70s, it would start expanding on the idea of digital gaming. So going forward to the actual 70s, the arcade was hugely popular and brought the most beloved games from that era with the likes of Breakout, Space Invaders, and Asteroid. Also, in 72, Magnavox created the first ever home video game system, the Magnavox Odyssey. Although it didn't do very well, only selling about 150,000 before being discontinued in 75. A few years later though, Atari took the throne with their Atari 2600. Atari would actually hold on to the crown up until the fateful year of 1983. The video game market had crashed, since there were so many consoles with all the same hardware and unpolished and rushed games that by the end of the year, Atari had lost over $536 million. And at the time, computers were also coming on the rise due to not only having better graphics, but can also be used for business purposes, making gaming consoles completely obsolete. But obviously knowing consoles nowadays, this isn't the end of them, and in 1985, one of the three main powerhouses, Nintendo, makes their first video game debut with the Nintendo Entertainment System. When it first came out, however, people were very speculative as to whether they should actually buy it or not, but Nintendo thought ahead of this. Instead of marketing the console as a gaming system, they advertised it as a toy, all because of Rob the Robot. Rob was a sort of add-on for the NES that would act like he was playing games with you. Because Rob was sort of a toy, they were able to advertise the console as such and be able to successfully sell over 61 million units worldwide. But what about the game? Luckily, Nintendo knew this part best, with such classics like Super Mario Bros., The Legend of Zelda, and Metroid, and these franchises would go on to be some of Nintendo's greatest. Now that Nintendo successfully brought back the video game, they would continue making their own games, up until Sega rose up in 1989 with their very own Sega Genesis. The Genesis was a very big step forward, as it effectively increased graphics from 8-bit up to 16-bit. This also allowed for much more intense games with the console's better processors. Sega also had great games to go with the Genesis too, such as the Sonic games, and many others most people don't know about today due to the lack of sequels and exposure. Soon after this, however, Nintendo rebutted with their own SNES, the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, with similar 16-bit graphics and overall power, but now with their own flair of games, commonly starting with the word Super in front of their old NES name. This is how things were for a while, until the idea of 3D games came arise, and there was actually a new competitor who made the first 3D console, and it was Sony's PlayStation in 1995. And at first, there weren't sticks, still just the D-pad. But still, 3D games were a huge revelation, with so many new possibilities. Now when the joystick did come about, it was with Nintendo's first 3D console, the Nintendo 64. Aside from the awkward controller itself, the stick was very nice to have and also allowed for 360-degree movement. Now for the next generation, things stayed fairly the same, although there was a new competitor, Microsoft, with their Xbox. Now with the GameCube, Xbox, and PS2, they were mainly making improvements to existing graphics, but then next gen gets really fun. So the 7th generation brings the Xbox 360, Wii, and PS3, which things got very interesting. So these new consoles tried to make new ways to play, with the Wii's motion control TV remote and the 360's Kinect, which uses real-world body movement. And on a separate note, the PS3 had a DVD player with even more enhanced graphics. Now both of the motion-based gimmicks were both very fun for a little bit, but were still very flawed. With Nintendo pushing motion controls and appealing to a wide audience, they really lost the hardcore crowd. And the Kinect just wasn't up to par with tracking, and with the limited games it had, it wasn't very fun to use. Although due to Nintendo's thrive for being for everyone, it did get them to over 101 million units sold. The next gen, however, was much better. The Xbox One, PS4, and Wii U were released, and one of those wasn't very good, and another one was the Wii U. Yes, the Wii U had a lot of great games, but there was a lot of confusion as to whether the Wii U was just an add-on for the original Wii or not, and there wasn't nearly as many sold as they wanted. Now the Xbox One doesn't have many exclusives, but a good step forward with consoles as a whole. And PS4 by far had the best exclusives with all their God of Wars and their Spider-Man. This gen really did cement how good graphics can get with the HD consoles. This is also the time that indie games became hugely popular with the rise of Shovel Knight and Super Meat Boy. Now the current generation is very exciting, even with only one out right now. So when it comes to the idea of the Switch, Nintendo basically took the idea of the Wii U's gamepad and made it the entire system, but still playable on a TV with a dockable system. Then later this holiday, we'll have the PS5 and Xbox Series X. Oh my god, who gave it that name? The new Xbox sets out to basically eliminate loading screens in the PS5 with just a general console upgrade. Also recently, there's a sign that the three main competitors may be starting to work with each other, mainly with Nintendo and Microsoft being buddy-buddy on bringing Banjo-Kazooie and Cuphead into Smash Ultimate. So soon, the console wars might be over and they could all be nice to each other. So the future is looking pretty good, graphics are pretty much as good as they can ever get, game making has been much more accessible with the rise of indies, and better games themselves have come up too. It's also really exciting to see what might come next due to how things are right now, and one thing I definitely can't wait for is Breath of the Wild 2. Also, Stadia exists. Okay, bye!